Welcome to Ace of Pentacles, your career strategy and workplace wellness podcast. I'm your host, Sarah, and I'm so happy you're here. Join me every week as we investigate how people design and discover their way through their careers. Together, we'll explore the science of well-being at work and discover tools and strategies to help us do well and be well. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Ace of Pentacles. Today, I have with me Dave Doetsch. He is currently a partner with the Wizard of Ads and also C.O.O. of Midwest Family of Companies. And Dave found his way to the podcast through Jeff, who was on the podcast last year. Jeff is a shamanic practitioner and counselor, and we talked a lot about soul fulfillment work. And Dave is someone who's been doing soul fulfillment work. So I wanted to chat with Dave about his journey. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Thank you. It's exciting to be here.
Dave, tell us a little bit about you, who you are, how you found your way here today to what you're doing today.
Well, I've been in an executive position in some way, shape, or form for over 15 years, probably closer to 20 years. And a role such as that takes a toll. It takes a real toll. I joke around sometimes when people will ask me, what is my job? And I tell them I'm the head custodian. I clean up all the messes because that's what you deal with every day. All the troublesome stuff comes to you. The things that others can't figure out or they don't feel the others will address accordingly, then they bring it to you. And then the average day, you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, almost kind of crisis points that come to you that you have to deal with. And it started to affect me. And in my lifetime, I've learned now through working with Jeff that I had forged my identity around my career. And when these things would happen and the toll it would take, it would make me question a lot about myself, a lot about others. And I needed that true guidance. I needed that help because I was feeling, the best word to put it, and something that Jeff and I still talk about to this day, is you would feel betrayed. You would feel jaded because you work your whole career to get to this kind of crescendo where you think you've arrived, and then suddenly you realize, be careful for what you wish for. Now that role has even expanded. In that expansion, I've adapted and I've evolved. And even to the point where people will say to me, you just seem different. You have a different way about you. Because for a long time in my career, I was a heavy driven person. Let's give me the challenge, give me the fix. I have to fix something. And if I can fix it, usually fixing troubled companies, then I will have achieved what matters the most. I will have saved. And that comes from something that goes back into my childhood and in my adult life at different points in time. And so saving at that time fulfilled my soul. The problem is that short-lived because, again, every day new nuances come into play. So as I had the opportunity to keep growing in my career, I had to find a better way to balance that out. And the first thing, I didn't even realize it at the time, Jeff brought it to my attention, is, hey, you got this thing called a soul, and your soul is aching. Can we address that? And it was surprising at first, but the way that he put it, in simple forms, that in our lifetime, we're always balancing out the survival dance with the spirit dance. And I had really built my entire existence at that point on the survival dance and only was remotely addressing the spirit dance. And once I recognized the spirit dance and embraced the spirit dance, things changed.
Dave, I have so many questions. Okay, let's start here. So tell us about the spirit dance. What's the difference between the survival dance and the spirit dance?
The spirit dance can be measured, and Jeff shared this with me, and I'm sure there's more than this. I'm giving it a rudimentary conclusion based on my own experience, which is allowing myself to delve into something that makes time disappear. And when I come out of what makes time disappear, I feel a different way. There's almost a different sense of being, almost a cleansing of some sort. He would talk about an Indian practice in multiple different types of Indian or indigenous people's cultures where they would create artwork with dust. And at the end of that project, they would wipe it away. Once it's been created and they share it for a window of time, they wipe it away. And it's like a cleansing, right? You've created something and now it's a cleansing and it's a clean slate. Right? It gives you that clean slate. It doesn't leave, for lack of a better term, barnacles, right? And so The spirit dance was recognizing my career was never going to appropriately address the spirit dance. It would fully embrace the survival dance, but it would not truly deliver the spirit dance. And I had to find a way, if I needed this cleansing, this clean slate, I had to bring it to a personal level. I had to allow myself to show up, right? Because in my career, I was able to create this persona, this character that isn't really me, but it's me, right? And the spirit dance says, I know who you are, and this isn't you, and now we have to get you to show up. So it's letting my true self show up, putting something out there at a personal level, and then allowing it to create a clean slate.
You know what I love about that example of making the art and then wiping it away is it's so symbolic of really how the temporary nature of everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even when you get to like a point in your career where you're like, this was the dream, you're like, okay, well, that was nice. What's next? And so tell us a little bit about what that spirit dance ended up being for you and how you discovered it, what you're doing that fulfills your soul.
Well, I'll go a little bit back in time in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went to college, I had entered as an art major, but I was also a scholarship football player. And this was back in the late 1980s. And in that era of time, those two things did not mix. That was oil and water. It was a rarity. So here's this guy who's an offensive lineman, a big guy, and he's doing artwork. And I actually had a unique situation where practice kind of bumped up with a class that I had. So I had to leave practice a little bit early to get to this class. And the football coaches would make practice stop, give me a hard time, make me do something calisthenics wise to punish me because I was leaving early, and then always doing it in a way that made me somewhat at risk of being late. So then all I could do would be run in the locker room, throw off my gear, and not even take a shower. And then I had to run across campus to get to this class. And then I'd get to the class and I was always a few minutes late. Well, then the art teacher's like, oh, well, look at Mr. Football Player who thinks he's so special that he can show up to class late. So then I try to go to the football coaches and say, could you help me leave just a hair earlier? They give me an even harder time. I'm even later to the class, to the point where the teacher then locks me out of the class to kind of prove a point. So I try to meet with him, the teacher, for the class, and he then bars me from the class and says, I'm going to give you the syllabus for the entire semester. You just finish your projects. Now, I got an A in the class. My artwork was strong enough and I delivered on it, but I never attended class again. So, and so in talking with my parents in that era, and they were like, look, you're getting a college scholarship at a good school. And art isn't going to give you a job. Now, I went into art because I always loved art. Art filled my soul, even, as a kid. And I was an honors art student in high school. So I really saw this career. And my parents, funny enough, because I mentioned this to you before we got started, my dad actually gave me a hard time, said, if you get an art major, you're just going to be doing catalogs for Whirlpool. Now I live where Whirlpool's headquarters is. So I then made the decision to shift into computer graphic design. Early era computer graphic design, doing an intern project. Somebody asked, hey, I'm doing my project. Could you do a voiceover? You have a good voice. So I did the voiceover. Then when I presented my internship, the program director for the college radio station was there and heard my voice, and he offered me a job on the spot to be on the radio station. So then a couple months later, a local radio station, not the college station, but a local station, hears my stuff and says, we want to give you a job. So I'm an overnight jock and a weekend jock at a local radio station. And next thing I know, my life goes in that whole direction. I then get into sales because I want to make more money. And that becomes my career. And I've done it now for over 35 years, been in that industry. And so I went from the overnight jock to now I'm the chief operating officer of a company that I'm an owner of. And so I've gone through this whole cycle. So I went up the ranks. And so I actually completely stopped doing any artwork for probably close to 30 years. Never did anything because I could fulfill in the spirit or in the survival dance. I could keep fulfilling myself. Here's a company, save the company. You save the company, go move to the next place, save the next company. You do that, you get a promotion, you get more money. And it's this kind of false deliverables of you're satisfying yourself. And then it reached a certain point when I kind of reached the high crescendo that now I didn't know what's that next thing, right? And what I didn't realize is that next thing was me. And I started having these struggles and these, like I explained, the feeling jaded and betrayed and angry and expecting people to change. And so when the opportunity came to start working with Jeff, he said, no, you're living too much in the survival dance and you've left the spirit dance at the door. So at one point he says to me early on, he says, I've got an idea for it, to understand what feeds the spirit, what makes time disappear. And I said, when I used to do my artwork, hours could go by. I wouldn't even know it. It would feel like a half an hour and it'd be half a day. And so he challenged me and he said, do some artwork. By time between now and the next time we get together, I want you to do artwork of some sort. And I did. And it was eye-opening. It truly was eye-opening. And for the first time, I could comprehend what he talked about with that spirit dance. And it was life-changing.
Dave, I just went on like a journey of emotions while you told that story. I'm a teacher and I get really choked up when I hear about students. And I've had this experience where teachers, they believe that they're living in the survival dance. I guess you could say that, right? And so they lead students to, away from kind of what their passion is. And not because of any malice. It's like they just want us to be successful. Our parents want us to be successful. Everyone wants us to be successful in this world, never understanding that there is this spirit dance. Dave, how has reconnecting with your spirit dance, how has that impacted the rest of your life, your career? Because you're still an executive, you're still in that world, but you started doing art again. What did that do for you?
Well, I remember something that Jeff talked about when we were going through the journey early on, and he had said the common behavior of individuals in your position is thinking that you run away from what you're doing and you have solved the problem. But actually all you've done is run away. And the likelihood is because you ran away, you're going to activate the survival dance in a new way, which will trick you into thinking you're feeding your spirit. When in reality, you've just done a reshift of the survival dance, and now you feel invigorated because you have something different to pay attention to. So he challenged me at the time and said, how do you stay where you're at and keep recognizing your spirit, your soul, your ism of who you are? And what became so unexpected was the fact that doing my artwork and sharing my artwork, a practice that I learned back in school when I was doing my artwork, is part of the process is to share it. Now, people will mistake that and think you're sharing it because you want to get feedback directly or you want them to tell you it's good. But no, when you put your art, you put your soul on whatever it is, a canvas, a piece of paper, clay, whatever it is, you put it out there, you're actually sharing it to see if something ignites inside of them. If with your soul being out and available, does it ignite something in them? So you see that oftentimes in artwork where somebody says, well, this says this to me, or that speaks in this way to me, or this is what I see in that, right? And that's great, actually. Sometimes people, I did at first misinterpret that, kind of forgot about that, where now what's actually happened is this is activating their soul. And they don't realize it, right? And so as I started doing that artwork and I started sharing it with people, they started seeing me as me. And I started sharing me in a little way as me because I've shielded that. It's easy to do. And that would open up dialogue. That would open up curiosity, and other elements. And then I would find I would share in a way that I wouldn't share before. But it also did something else, which is it made me remember who I am. Like I'd created that persona of this corporate guy, this executive guy, this problem solver guy, the Superman, had put on the cape and go save the day, right? And that feels pretty good for a while. And so now I started remembering who was that persona that my mom knew. Who was that persona that my best friend that I'm still friends with from the 6th grade, who is it that he connected with, right? Who is it that my siblings knew, right? And I'd lost sight of that. Well, you leave those things behind as you build through life, but then when life throws the challenges, those are the things that we need to recognize that soul, because the soul starts waking up. It's either banging at the door saying, don't forget about me, or you wake it up and suddenly you're like, I really enjoy you being here. And so doing that artwork, sharing the artwork, it then started having a domino effect where I would bring artwork to work and just set it down. And people would be like, who did that? I did. Oh my gosh, where did that come from? How did that? And I would share things and they would see me differently. There was almost a calmer demeanor, a kinder conscientiousness. And I enjoyed that instead of this constant, you're the boss and the pushback or the expectation or whatever it might be. And so instead, I then started sharing more artwork. And then some people would be like, how do you buy artwork? And then somebody would come out of the woodwork and say, I heard about your artwork and I went on your Instagram page and I saw it and I really like it. Can I commission a piece from you? And then companies that I knew and did business with were like, you do artwork? Could you commission one for us? And I'm like, yeah. And then suddenly it just opened up this whole other world that I once dreamed could exist and had pushed aside for circumstances and let it come alive again.
Wow. So your soul dance, your spirit dance, what I'm hearing is that your spirit dance naturally kind of engages the people that need to be engaged to then create that aspect of your life where you get to be who you are. And you don't have to leave your corporate job and your, executive position. And I think, what I loved about what you shared, you said it so well about like the spirit dance. We start to bring that part of us to life and then that becomes the survival dance. And I think that's so relevant, especially right now, because there are so many people waking up to their spirit dance, I think, to their soul's calling. And I see a lot of people who, are like, this healing modality really helped me. And then they just like become, it's kind of like if you met with Jeff and then you're like, wow, Jeff really helped me. I want to become Jeff. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
I want to go do the work that Jeff does, but you didn't do that. You did the work that you were doing. You built this life and you didn't leave that life. You incorporated your spirit dance into your life. And I think that is so powerful.
Yeah. And along that path, I had to be reminded by Jeff because life is still life and survival elements show up all the time. And survival elements are like waves coming over you, right? And it's not just one wave, it's a constant wave at times. And I would get frustrated and I would say to Jeff, look, I'm working so hard on the spirit dance. Why is the survival dance not going away? Why is it not diminishing? I made this mistake that if I wake up to my soul and suddenly that shouldn't be there as much anymore. And he kind of laughed a little, and said, Dave, it's a give and take. You now know the formula. So when the survival dance comes, you're going to do the dance. You know the dance. The key is don't stay in the dance longer than you need to be there. And if you're going to have to stay, keep dancing, set it aside, go do the spirit dance so that you can replenish yourself and then get back to the survival dance. This now becomes a tool in your existence overall. Life is always going to be survival of the fittest. And maybe it's not times where I'm out and having to fight animals in the wild. That's not how it is anymore. But I have to fight my mind. I have to fight my beliefs. I have to fight what's coming at me and how I'm letting it affect me, right? That is the survival dance as well. That's that survival of the fittest today. And when you're going to be the survival of the fittest, you're going to have to either have skills or tools to help you survive. And for me, that's what you find out in the spirit dance, what those tools and what those skills need to be. Now you know they're there. Use them.
Yeah. Oh, Dave, what has been the most challenging part of this journey for you, finding your way back to your spirit dance, incorporating that into your life? What's been the challenging parts of that?
Well, once I started communicating this and sharing this, especially in the executive world, there were people who thought it was interesting and cool and wanted to know more about it. And then some people who thought that's just a bunch of touchy-feely stuff. It's really ridiculous. And now I really have some judgment of you. But they never bring that judgment forward, evidently. But it's there, right? And so how do you then not let that get to you? To either judge them harsher or to try to change what you're kind of evolving into, right? So I've had to be very conscientious of they don't know me or are unwilling to see me having a soul. They need me to be this other character. And there's nothing I can do to change that. Does it make them bad? But I have to remember they're never going to feed my soul. So when I interact, and there's a select group of people, I know that when I interact with them, if I don't bring about some of that role for them to satisfy their survival need, then it's not as an effective relationship in a world of business that it needs to be. And I have to be okay with that. And then the other side of the equation is those individuals love to keep throwing survival elements at me because they've learned that, well, if Dave just stays in survival mode, he's not in this other character. And I'm not sure I'm comfortable with Dave in this other character. And I have to be very mindful not to accept it because it has been such a common practice to make the chemicals in my, brain and in my body react that I have to be mindful of it because I've had that happen a few times over the last couple of years where I've gotten into that again. And it's like, now I've left the soul stuff on the side and I haven't done a painting in 3 months. And I have to go, wait a minute, what am I doing? And then I realize I've allowed myself to kid myself that I'm satisfying. And then the moment I start doing another painting, I can feel that difference. I feel it.
Yeah.
And the only way I can equate it is if my soul has been kind of woken up and shaken, and now it's creating a reverberation in my whole system.
So Dave, how do you block that? For me, it's like what I'm hearing is there are people who have not woken up to their spirit dance in our world, and they don't understand the value of it. They don't see the value of it. It doesn't make them good or bad. It's just that's their existence. That's their life. And this is, our life. And it can be really draining. So for me personally, I feel like sometimes I'm just drained of being around a lot of people who are still in that survival dance where I'm trying to break away from it, right? How do you have a best practice for how you maintain that balance for yourself?
I do. And Jeff has taught me this because I've been in that same boat and I have shared my frustrations. And he will then remind me to ask this question. And that question is, how do I address this with compassion? So then this individual or this situation arises and it's now going to drain me and my frustration is there and I can almost feel a seething of some sort coming on with it, right? And then we then start asking questions. Why? Why is this happening? Why did they do this? Why becomes the element. And that's when Jeff taught me, he says, as soon as that why comes out, change the question. How do I approach this with compassion? And if I do that, and I do that more often than not now, I find that my whole mindset shifts because I changed my expectation of them. Because that's what it is. I had an expectation, and maybe even better yet, to put in the word hope. So I had a hope and they dashed my hopes. So now I'm feeling less or frustrated or whatever it is. But if I change that question to how do I approach this with compassion? Now I look at it and say, where are they coming from? How is it that they need me to be this way? And now I see them a little bit differently. And it's not necessarily from a viewpoint of sympathy. I think it's more from a viewpoint of courtesy. Well, this is how they're approaching it. This is what matters to them from what I know. And for me to think I can just change that because I've been changing, growing, evolving is unrealistic. But in those moments, we don't do that. Because we know, and oftentimes we know these people and we've had relationships in some way, shape, or form, and we've maybe even shared these things with them. So how do I approach it with compassion? And I tend to find I breathe a little easier and I'm a little more patient and far more conscientious.
Yeah, it's just becoming aware of those moments and then having something to pull you out of them, like this question, how do I approach this with compassion?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have to put that into practice, right? That has to be a part of my practice, and I have to remember that. So, giving myself those moments of pause when I know, because I know that feeling. We know that feeling, right? As soon as that feeling comes on, you know it. And having that wisdom should give us the ability to have that moment of pause.
What has been the most, the most rewarding part of this journey for you?
One of them happened about a year ago. So I live in an old industrial building that was converted into lofts, and I do my paintings and I just leave them in my place. I often frame them unless they're paintings on a canvas, and then that's obviously cleaned up to its own. And I just set them nicely along the walls on the floor, or I'll stack them up a little bit. Well, my landlord got in touch with me and he said, hey, do you mind if I come in and change the batteries on the smoke detectors? I'm like, yeah, that's no problem. He then sends me a text and says, where did you get all this artwork? And I said, well, it's mine. And he goes, what do you mean mine? I said, well, I did it. He goes, seriously? And I said, yeah, I did all of those. He goes, those are actually pretty good. I said, well, thank you. And he said, I know a guy that is looking for new talent for an art gallery. Do you mind if I take some pictures and show him your stuff? And I said, sure. So 6 months go by and I don't hear a thing. I kind of lose track of it. And then suddenly I get a text from somebody at a number I don't have, and it says, I'd like to talk to you about your artwork. And I said, okay, who is this and what is this about? Well, my landlord's name's Ken. And he said, Ken sent me some images a while ago, and I'm just now, coming upon them, and I'd like to do a gallery showing of your artwork. And I said, wow. He's like, so I want to set an appointment with you and come look at them myself. And then I want to talk about how many pieces do you have and in what format do you have them? And so we set up that appointment. He came, and next thing I know, I got to make sure I got 25 pieces of artwork that are framed, available for hanging, that they'd be hanging at the similar heights and all this other kind of stuff. And here's the date. And something that I dreamed of when I was in art in high school, that someday I'd have a gallery showing and people would come and look at my artwork, came true. And so I had that gallery showing and was up for about a month. So that was pretty cool, and got some wonderful feedback. And we did a big, gallery event and sold some artwork. And it just was unique because in my whole life, as I've been in this career and in the same industry for decades and grown from, being a, grunt doing overnights to being the top dog in a company, which is not very common. That was great, but nothing was better than that art gallery showing. Because here it was, here's me for everybody to see. And then I could sit and talk about it. And people came who I never met in my life that would say, what inspired you? Why'd you choose this color? What made you decide to do this in such a different way? And just having those conversations, it was one of the most meaningful experiences of my life. And at this point, if I just keep doing what I do, and I'll sell a piece here or there, I'm not out, working hard to try to sell it. It's not my goal. I've tried not to turn it into a business. I have enough businesses. I don't need another business. But that was pretty special. And I'll check that off on the box of life that happened. Right. And then the other thing that's been cool is now as I do my work more, I have, as you said at the start, I'm a marketing consultant, but I also run these media companies. And in the media company side, I'm much more of the executive and the banking and the money and all this kind of stuff. But the marketing consultant, I do the creativity side, and I share my artwork often, and their customers really get excited about the fact that they're looking to me for guidance on marketing, but I'm also a creative in a way that they don't expect. And it just creates this dialogue, and they'll be asking me, hey, have you done any new artwork? I'd love to see what you've done lately. So just having that be a part of my persona of who I am is fun. And I enjoy that.
Yeah.
Because that just keeps reminding me of that spirit dance, right? And that the spirit dance can be a part of my survival dance if I allow it.
Yeah. Dave, you know what I love about that story? So many of us have these big dreams, and we think that the way to get that dream to happen is chase it and go after it and work hard for it. And I'm not saying that that's not going to get you there, but it feels like your dream found you through all these serendipitous synchronicities, right? And it was simply because you were doing your spirit dance.
Yeah. Once I allowed the spirit dance and the spirit to be alive and an active part of my life, then it became magnetic. And exactly like you said, it wasn't me having to chase it. It was never my goal to chase. It found me. And I think that's a real lesson, because I've stumbled across that in readings that I've done and maybe some videos that I've watched where that's the case. And what it reminds me of is my artwork predominantly is abstract. I also do impressionism and some pointillism and things of that nature, but a lot of it's abstract. anytime I do the abstract, people will look at it and say, I see a fish, I see a face, I see a hand, I see a dog, I see a whatever, right? They see something. And what's great about that is it woke something up inside of them. They're trying to make sense of it. Their soul is alive, but the logic part of the brain is saying, wait a minute, this soul is alive, inside of you, but you don't know what it means. So that must be a dog or that must be a fish, because your soul can't just be happy, can't be ignited, right? And that's a normal process in artwork and especially in abstract work. So now that I've made this a part of the abstract of my existence, people see things in me they didn't see before.
Yeah.
And that's where the magnetism comes. It's kind of cool.
I think it's so cool. Dave, I talk to a lot of people. I love all my guests that show up and share their stories. But this might not make sense for some people listening to this, but I feel a stirring inside of me when I talk to you. And I think that's very much, for me, that's like, I know that the spirit dance that I get to do is this type of a conversation, this type of education, like what's inside of you, and let's wake that up and get you moving in the right direction. And so I love this. So thank you so much for this conversation. It's not over, but thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure. It ignites me as well.
Dave, for someone who is like, okay, this is great, like I'm in the survival dance, I have no idea how to get to the spirit dance and how to start doing that, what advice would you offer them? Where would they start?
I think they could look at a couple of options. Obviously, from my experience with Jeff and that shamanic or having that kind of soulful mindset and sharing and guidance, seek someone out that can offer that to you. Now, that may not be easy. You might be in a place that's not readily available. Okay, but that's an option. And people have said, so this is therapy? Well, it can be very therapeutic, but it's not therapy, because sometimes then people will want to resist therapy. And it's like, no, this is guidance. This is lessons. This is learning how to practice. This is awareness, right? And then I would simply share what Jeff shared with me, which is, if you sit for a moment, maybe over a cup of coffee or whatever it is that you like, a glass of cold water, whatever it might be, but a moment where you have quiet and think about what makes time disappear. What is something that you do that makes time disappear? And for us all, it's different, because not everybody can do what I do. That's not reasonable. But it also probably aligns with some form of a God-given gift, right? So I know somebody and they said to me that, well, I just like messing with my plants. I can take a plant that's on the verge of, just dying and not being vibrant anymore, and I can bring it back to life. But that's just gardening. It's not what you do. And I said, I fully disagree, because when I've gone past your house and I see all the flowers, I see a canvas. And that canvas is full of colors. And you've got pinks, and you've got reds, you've got blues, you've got purples, you've got green, you've got white, and the way that you do the aesthetic. And they laughed and they said, yeah, well, people always comment on how much they love to drive past the house and see my flowers. And I said, that's your canvas. And now let me ask you a simple question. When you're gardening, what happens with time? Gosh, I got to catch myself, because sometimes I don't even realize it got dark out. I go, exactly. So you'll know when your spirit is being engaged when time no longer is relevant. So think about those things, because I remember when Jeff asked me that, at first I was like, I don't know. And it's not the only thing. I like to golf. And the next thing I know, I'll go golf and 4 hours will have passed. And I could have golfed faster than that. But I've loved the pace and the quiet and the sound and the color, right? So that alone can do it. So look to a thing, multiple things, that when you do it, time vanishes, time disappears. It's no longer relevant. And that is a great starting point for you. And I'll share this story. So people can say, that's great, Dave. You were an artist. This was easy. I did not do artwork for 30 years. And it's a skill. So when I used to do artwork, my common practice was using charcoal pencils and charcoal itself or ink to do faces. And close in on faces, often eyes, to high detail, to where at a distance people would think it was a picture, not a drawing. And I had gotten away from that for so long, I didn't know if I still had the skill set. So I was a bit cowardly. And I said, I'm going to do something I never did. I'm going to do abstract painting. I wasn't a painter. I didn't deal with paints and paintbrushes and all this stuff. I never did it. That was not my art of choice. But I did the abstract because then I said to myself, I know it makes time disappear. And if it's not any good anymore, nobody will know, nobody will care. I let my ego take over, right? I was a bit skittish. Yes, that made time disappear, but what if I've learned I'm not good at it anymore? That would hurt, right?
Oh.
And so even if you're like, I haven't done this in years, you don't know what it'll bring about, because now I've done the abstracts to the point that I had a gallery showing. And then I even challenged myself of, all right, I'm going to go back and try to do one of the things I used to do. And I did it. It was natural. But what's interesting is I enjoy the abstracts so much more now.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you mentioned your God-given gift. I think it's okay to let that gift also show up in whatever way it wants to show up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And within that, there's a very important word, play. The soul wants to play.
Yeah.
People be like, well, you got to go back to childhood. Well, what you look back in that time is that willingness to play.
Yeah.
Allow yourself to play. Because the rest of the stuff, when you and I joked before we got on the podcast here about adulting, right?
Yeah.
Adulting is not a lot of fun. It has its moments, but it's not a lot of fun. It's overrated. They kept telling us it was going to be so great.
Yeah. Do not recommend, guys. Do not recommend.
But the hard part with adulting is we forget how to play.
Yeah.
And we need playtime. It'd be great if every day we had recess, forcing us to go play, right?
I mean, recess and nap time.
Yeah, exactly.
They knew what they were doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, that's another advisement I'd give is just go play. And I did have one other person who said, I have no God-given gift. And I said, yeah, you do. You do. Let me share it with you. And so I informed this individual, you are one of the funniest people. One of the reasons I love spending time with you is you make me laugh. And they're like, I'm not funny. I said, you're hilarious. And whether you realize it or not, you're hilarious. So, I don't know how you share that. And maybe you would never have the courage to go stand up on a stage, but understand that you are funny and be mindful around you of the smiles you put on people's faces. Because if I'm ever around you, that's what you bring into the room, and you do it with your sense of humor. So in that sense, you're playing, keep playing. So it can come in many different shapes and forms. It's not have to be crafts. It doesn't have to be physical. It can be many things.
Yeah. I sometimes also have people who say they don't really have a gift. And just like in the story, a lot of the times I will tell them what I think their gift is. And they're like, that's not true. I don't do that.
Right.
And I think it's because it comes so naturally to us that we're just like, oh, well, this is just how I am. This is who I am. Yeah. It's hard to recognize that.
You have to be willing to allow others to give you that input.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this, absolutely. So if you're listening to this, one thing I always tell people, I'm like, I know we live in this culture of like, we're not supposed to talk about ourselves or ask about ourselves, or there's this weirdness about it. I actually really encourage people to ask your colleagues, ask your manager, ask your friends, what is it that I'm really good at that's different? And it's a hard question to ask because then you seem like self-absorbed or self-obsessed. But I think it's a really important question to ask people.
Yeah, because you can't be self-aware alone.
Yeah.
And that's the mindset that most people have is, well, to be self-aware, I have to do all the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
That's not practical.
That's not. And the other thing I will say is sometimes the feedback, what's really a beautiful moment, I think, is when someone tells you, I see this in you. Like people always tell me, like, you're very playful. And my whole life, I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm so serious. I talk about such serious things. And everyone's like, no, but you're really playful. And what I realized is where I do my best work is when I'm making really heavy, difficult conversations playful. And so it's like when you combine those, you're like, wait, I think I'm like this. Somebody else thinks I'm like that. And then you bring those pieces together and maybe that's your gift, right? And so that gift of God, man, like God-given gift it's a beautiful thing when you find it, when you finally accept it. It's really beautiful.
I heard a quote along those lines that I thought was really interesting. And it said that you think you know who you are, but do you understand in your whole lifetime, you never even look yourself in the face? You always have to get it from a different perspective. Even yourself looking in a mirror. right? So it has to come from somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. My goodness. Dave, where can I've seen your artwork. I think it's beautiful. Where can
Thank you.
I or my audience, our audience here, where can we find you? Where can we find your artwork?
Well,
Tell us.
my artwork can be found at my Instagram page, and I gave you that link. I don't know if that'll be
Yeah.
a part of it, but I'd have to
Yes.
look at it quick to see what the name is with it, but I can do that real fast. If anybody ever wanted to just reach out to me, my email is daved@wirx.com or wizardofads.com. So one or the other, both of those will work. And if people just want to chat, I'd be open to it. I'd just sharing this journey I've been on. If I can do that, that would be great.
I will drop the links that you sent me, your LinkedIn, your email, and your Instagram in our show notes so folks can find you that way. And then I will also share that information on my Instagram page. So we'll be able to connect with you and see your next gallery viewing
Yeah,
and
and I do
support
have a
your
dream
art.
thing to happen next, so I guess
Yeah.
I'll promote it here to push myself to do it.
Yeah.
Because I've had a lot of people asking me to do this, is doing a series of my own videos while I'm doing my artwork, talking about the soulful journey. So that's something that I'm going to work on. So that'll be coming next on YouTube.
Dave, I am so excited for this. I'm very excited about this development, and I will definitely be promoting that and supporting you
Well, I'd
in
love that.
every way
Thank
that
you.
I can. Absolutely. I can't wait. Do you have a timeline for this goal?
I want to get it done by up and running and at least have 3 videos posted by my birthday, which is at the end of May. So that's kind of a time frame, as I've got some business projects that are winding down that's going to open up more time. And that is a commitment I do have.
Wonderful. Well, I can't wait. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience?
Just start the journey and understand that our nature in life is the survival dance. When we're born, the survival dance is, how do we eat? How do we breathe? How do we see? We don't even know it. How do we walk? How do we talk? How do we learn? Our whole existence is survival dance just to be human beings. And the spirit stays along with us for a good part of the journey until we get into that really logical part of life. That might be in your teens, might be in your 20s, but now you're in a different mode of survival, and that tends to tie to money and responsibility. And that then tends to be what pushes the soul aside. And we diminish it to a degree, and we expect it truly to come from others. We expect our soul to be fulfilled from others, and we stop expecting it from ourselves. And then people will talk about there's a midlife crisis, and Jeff taught me this in the cultures that he has immersed himself in. And it's not a midlife crisis. It's your soul saying, hey, I'm here. You forgot about me. Let's start engaging. And that's okay. And so we are built to be survivalists, and the survival dance is the norm. The soul dance, our society today tends to push aside or make it come along for the ride. And it's up to you to be open to it and to bring it forward. And I can only say from my own experience, you will be glad you did.
Dave, thank you so, so much.
You're welcome.
I'm very excited for people to hear you and see you and learn from you. So
Yes,
thank
I
you.
love to share. At this point in my existence, sharing is what it's all about.